Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's the show where me and John just casually jab the pro wrestling business in the ribs and say, "What are you doing? The fuck's this shit?" Otherwise known as Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense.
Hmm.
So today we're gonna talk about a couple of things. We want to talk about Terry Funk, and we're gonna mention Paul Orndorff as well because he unfortunately passed away
Yeah.
not that long before the recording of this episode. When was that? Sunday?
Yeah, I believe so. Or it was at least announced on Monday morning, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. Which is a shame.
Yeah,
Dreadful
it's always
shame.
a shame.
Orndorff is a guy that I am not super familiar with, but he's one of those names that was always kind of brought up. If you kind of talk to somebody from that generation for a while, once they get past a couple like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, once they start going a little deeper, Paul Orndorff's one of those names that they always seem to bring up.
Yeah, he was someone I didn't really see a whole lot of as a kid. I think he pretty much almost retired when I first started watching because he had that like pinched neck or nerve in his neck or whatever it was, but it basically caused like this massive injury to his arm where the arm just couldn't really hold any muscle mass. But I mean, it's to Orndorff's credit that like he overcame that and was able to come back from that potentially career-ending injury and still wrestle for like a good, like 12 or 13 years, whatever it was.
Wow.
So yeah, he's a tough dude.
Did he just lift people with his other arm?
No, he managed to actually make his bad arm his good arm. Like he just like trained it up so much that it had like so much strength in. Yeah, it looked physically smaller than the other arm, but I believe it was stronger. So yeah, he did well there.
There you go. It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. That happened to Dave Mustaine. He stepped on his arm wrong one time and like totally fucked up the nerves in his arm, and he had to like totally like relearn how to play guitar.
I thought you were going to say he got pile driven by Hulk Hogan.
He might have done. I mean, didn't Hulk Hogan say he was going to be the bass player for Metallica?
Yeah, there you go.
So he easily could have. He would. That means he would have interacted with Dave Mustaine at some point.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, get Hulk Hogan on the phone and ask him about Dave Mustaine. He's probably the only person left from Metallica who wants to talk to him.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because I really like him.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah, he's all right. He's not bad. Today's podcast is going to be about Megadeth. It's not. It's not going to be about Megadeth. So it's a dang shame to hear about Paul Orndorff. I'm gonna have to like go back and check out some of his stuff, guys. People out there on the internet, people listening to this, you wonderful people, give us some suggestions. Like, let us know what would be like the absolute premium Paul Orndorff match to watch because we want to watch it. We want to check it out, see all his old stuff. Did he really get pile driven by Hulk Hogan? We'll never know. Did he?
I don't know. I think he might have done.
Hulk Hogan doesn't really use a pile driver that much, does he?
No, but it was Paul Orndorff's move, and so I could see Hogan using it against him at some point. But
that sounds like Hogan.
Yeah, sneaky Pete.
He is a sneaky Sandra, is what that guy is. Watch out for that guy. Although that's surely common knowledge by now. Everybody always says, watch out for Hulk Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
He'll steal your money. Anyway, speaking of Hulk Hogan, today's show. Sorry, I caught myself there. Today's show is really about Terry Funk. We had heard that Terry Funk was in a bit of a pinch, as it were, having a bit of a rough time these days. He's in an assisted living kind of situation.
Yeah.
So I think it's like it's not like an old folks home, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I think because it was brought up and first came to light by Don Morocco on some other podcast, which I assume couldn't have been about wrestling, but must have been about something else.
We're the only podcast in town.
Yeah.
Why didn't you come on this show and do it?
Well, open invite, Don Morocco.
Yeah, come on. We can't pay you. We're not going to pay you. But come
No.
on. Any other secrets you want to tell people? Tell them this show, the only wrestling podcast in town.
But it does sound as if he sort of exaggerated how bad Terry Funk is at the moment. Like, it sounds like, from what I've heard from Tommy Dreamer, that Terry Funk was in a bit of a bad way when his wife passed away a couple of years ago, and he was basically living on the Double Cross Ranch alone. And yeah, this is why he got moved to the assisted living facility. But since then, it's a much better environment for him, and he's lucid. He still has a lot of his faculties. He has good days and bad days, like all of us do, but he's hanging in there, as you'd expect someone as tough as Terry Funk to do. So yeah, it's not as bad as it first sounded, thankfully.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like, he's on death's door or whatever. Which I think is probably a good thing for death.
Oh, yeah, God.
Can you imagine Terry Funk at your door? You're like, oh, he's going to hit me with a chicken.
Yep.
Did we watch that on a watch along, or did we just talk about that on the watch along?
I don't remember him hitting someone with a chicken.
I remember talking about it. Maybe we didn't watch that one because we did watch something like WCW hardcore bullshit thing. Remember whenever the guy fell off the balcony and then they never mentioned it again?
Of course.
Go back and check out our watch along episode if you want, from WCW Thunder. It was amazing. Terry Funk was on it because he was in the hardcore division at the time. WCW late to the party when it comes to their hardcore division. And I thought, who's the most hardcore person we have? It's got to be Terry Funk. So at some point in a match, there's like a frozen chicken somewhere, and he puts the frozen chicken on his fist, and then he punches somebody with a chicken. Now, if anybody else in the world, any other wrestler you care to name, had done that, I'd say for the most part, you wouldn't have been able to find somebody who could pull that off, except for Terry Funk. If you heard that Steve Austin put a chicken on his fist to punch the guy in the face, you're like, Steve, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. But you hear Terry Funk did that, you're like, yep, that sounds about correct.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's right up his street, You
kind of imagine he's done it a few times as well, not just the once.
I'm sure he did that before, like years before that. Which is why they did it on WCW that one time, because Funk had done that before. So basically, what we're saying, if you're unfamiliar with Terry Funk, he's quite the character. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
He's unique. He's really scrappy, like he's a fighter, which is why, if he is ever at Death's door, Death's gonna have a real tough time with that because Terry Funk would fight it, So Terry Funk always, to me, felt like one of those guys that would never ever die. Like and I say if, because I still feel like he is immortal, but if he ever were to actually die, I feel like that would be like the most down to earth moment I'd ever have. I'm like, oh my God, Terry Funk died, then we're all mortal.
Yeah.
All of us. There is no saving grace, I feel like he easily could be the guy that, ends up being 178 years old, doing moonsaults.
Of course, yeah, he'd still be doing the moonsaults.
He's fascinating, really, when you look at him, because do you know when he started wrestling? Because he would have started a long
1965, I think it was.
All right. Do you know when he finally retired?
2017, I want to say.
That's ridiculous. 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like, can you name any other wrestler that would do that? And some people have to, like, they find that after their heyday, they still have to wrestle to make some money. Times are tough. But Terry Funk, he does it because he loves it, right?
Yeah.
Funk's all right. He'll just go back to his farm. He doesn't need money. So he has been wrestling for, what did you say, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s? 6 decades?
Something like that, yeah.
That's insane. Nobody's ever done that. You know, like before the show, we were talking about Rey Mysterio. I'm like, oh, he started in the '80s and he's still wrestling today. Like that's still 2 decades off Terry Funk's record.
I think the only person who's got him beat is his brother, Dory Funk Jr., who debuted 2 years before him and then retired officially 2 years after him.
Oh, that's such a brother thing to do.
Oh, totally.
Isn't it? Oh, spiteful. You couldn't just let Terry Funk have it.
Yeah.
Although to be fair, at some point, like Dory Funk at the beginning was the more popular, the more over, the more well known of the two.
Yeah, he was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I'm sure he was at least a couple of times, wasn't he?
I think so. Yeah, he was. Yeah, and so people were like, "This guy's the main event." But it's funny because these days, if you talk to people about the Funks, they're gonna say Terry Funk before they would say Dory Funk.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
I think Dory's moved more into training and stuff since over the last 30 years or so, whereas Terry has still been involved in major promotions and major matches and fighting for world championships and stuff. So that's why, I think our generation certainly will tell you that Terry Funk is the bigger name of the two.
That's a very good point. Excellent point. Yeah, I think so. Also because at some point, Terry Funk he worked in the big three during the time whenever it was super popular.
Yeah.
Even though technically in the WWE/F, he wasn't Terry Funk.
I think he did still have a few matches as Terry Funk, like after the Mick Foley heel turn where he gave up being Cactus Jack and had that wild Falls Count Anywhere match, I think it was, on Raw with Terry Funk. And they were both just wrestling as themselves and beat each other all over the arena. That, in fact, featured a moonsault when I think he must have been about 54 years old at that point. A moonsault off a balcony. And yeah, it's just a wild match. And then after that, when Mick Foley was Dude Love and having his run with Steve Austin for the world title, I think Terry Funk had a couple of matches on Raw, but then he pretty much, said he was going to retire again and popped up in ECW instead.
Well, yeah, he always had a bit of a relationship with ECW.
Yeah.
He was there from the early days, and he really helped them. I don't know if he helped them stay afloat. I would say that that's a fair thing to say, that Terry Funk really helped ECW in its early Extreme days.
I'd say he put them on the map as well.
Yeah, like without Terry Funk, they're missing a big part of it.
He brought legitimacy to the company because, a lot of these guys wrestling for ECW at the time were unknowns, really. Public Enemy and, the Sandman and Sabu, people like that. Like, you'd have to be pretty knowledgeable to know about them. But Terry Funk obviously had like a career before this and had been over to Japan and had major runs in WWF and WCW by this point. So yeah, he helped ECW a hell of a lot, and I think he was a good choice as like the first ECW champion as well, wasn't he?
Wasn't that Shane Douglas?
Oh yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I stand corrected.
Although he did win the ECW championship.
Yes.
Terry Funk. So, it's all good. And seriously, like having a guy like Terry Funk there really, really does add to the legitimacy of it. Because like you said, the Sandman, a hell of a character. But, he's not with the best will in the world. Not main event in WrestleMania someday, right?
No.
But Terry Funk has main evented legitimate wrestling cards against guys like Ric Flair and Jerry Lawler. So, he is legit. He must have been NWA champion.
Well, I thought so, but I don't think he did.
That can't be right.
Oh no, he definitely did. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where I thought he didn't win it, but yeah.
Maybe we were thinking of their brother Tony Funk.
Yeah, there was a Jimmy Jack Funk. Maybe
Jack
that was
Funk.
him.
There was a Flash Funk.
Yeah, I don't think he was part of the family.
You don't think Flash Funk was related to Terry Funk?
Probably not.
They both did moonsaults.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how much more evidence you need, officer, but to me that looks like open and shut case.
I guess so.
So yeah, at this point, Terry Funk, former NWA champion, and decorated man by that point, and he helped out ECW, and that was one of the factors that helped put them on the map. So like I had said to you earlier, I was watching November to Remember in 1995, which is a pay-per-view I used to really love as a youngster, as a young man. I really liked that show. The main event is Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer against Raven and Cactus Jack. So you can see why I would love this already. Like, good lord, how could this not be good? And it's pretty much what you'd expect it to be. Which is a heck of a lot of fun. FYI, I don't know if this is with every ECW show, but I watched that show back again. I'm like recently, just to watch that main event. I'm like, it's not perfect. I remember this being a lot better than it is, But it is a lot of fun. There's some really good stuff on there. Rey Mysterio is on there. Stevie Richards. I think that might be the first appearance of the Blue Meanie. Very good pay-per-view.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know, exciting. So everybody go watch that. But the main event is Terry Funk and Cactus Jack. Well, Terry Funk against Cactus Jack, really, because that was a big part of the 90s. Was Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. Like we already said, whenever Terry Funk was in the WWE, WWF at the time, when was that, 1998? Yeah,
sort of 98, I think. Maybe he came in late 97.
Maybe 97, yeah. They put him with Mick Foley. They put us with Cactus Jack because that was the most effective way to use both Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. You look at these two guys knocking the shit out of each other, and you go, "Wow, those guys are legit, right?" Because like Terry Funk, yeah, he may put a chick on his fist and punch a guy, but like it still looks legit. It's somehow he pulls off this gimmick of him being this crazy wild man, and it all fits together. It all you're like, he's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me. You can see in his face, he's definitely gonna kill me. And this rivalry really started in the 90s. Was it over here or was it Japan? It must have been in WCW.
No, I don't think they really crossed paths in WCW because at the time that Cactus Jack first showed up in WCW, Terry Funk had basically been turned into like a color commentary kind of guy, as well as a host of like a little segment. So he was doing interviews and whatnot. So he basically got tired of that and left WCW for a few years. And that's when he sort of eventually made his way over to Japan and the King of the Death matches and stuff, and where he really got to know Mick Foley.
So, yes, you would imagine that a big part of the mystique behind Cactus Jack and Terry Funk and their rivalry would have been what they got up to in Japan. And by that, I mean, of course, they had a fight. That's what they got up to in Japan. Well, they had a series of fights. I don't think they had one fight. I think they had lots of fights. But they both competed in the King of the Death match.
That's correct.
Which I think, when was that, 94, 95?
95.
Around the time you're talking about. Yeah, that after Funk left WCW. So, 95. I have never, to this day, seen this match. And I got to go look it up. Because I've heard about it a lot. I'm a big Mick Foley fan. I read the book where he talked about this, and I was like, exploding death match? What? That sounds like the greatest thing I would ever see. Boy, if only there was an exploding death match in current times. that I could watch and see if it was exactly as splendiferous as the Mick Foley one sounds. But you know, it's up in the because here that's the funny thing. I haven't seen the 1995 King of the Death match, so I don't know if it's as good as Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley. I don't know. How can I possibly know that? But I hear they really like knock the hell out of each other.
Yeah, they blew the hell out of each other as well. Like
In a metaphor, not in a
not
sex
no,
way.
get your mind
No,
out the gutter there. Jeez, come on.
not like that at all. Come on, people. We're better than this. We're a respectable podcast.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
like Mick Foley in his book was talking about how he was coming back to America, like on the plane back, and like he could smell like burnt meat or something. And it turned out it was his arm.
Yeah. In his book, there's a big picture of him with his arm. Like,
Yeah.
you can see it the whole way down his arm is just the skin is burnt off.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just doing the Cactus Jack, like bang bang into the camera, like, yeah, what do you think of this? Like showing off the entire arm. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you look so happy there, dude. He's very, very pleased with himself. But, you know, that's Mick Foley for you. But I remember hearing about that, and I was like, okay, that sounds intense, right? Doesn't it? The King of the Death match, Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk in a barbed wire C4 explosives match. You're like, that sounds like the fucking dream match, doesn't it?
I mean, it sounds a bit like a child booked it, really, but
yeah. But that's the thing. Whenever you're like a kid too, whenever you're a teenager, you're like, that's the greatest thing I ever heard, right? Like, it's just amazing. Like, there couldn't be any more violent. Like, it's gotta be real. You know, that's the kind of wrestling I like to see. Which is funny. You know, fast forward 20 years, and I'm like, I think I've had my fill of exploding death matches and zombie matches. Thank you very much. No more of these. Imagine you were like in 2001 and your older self went back in time and was like, dude, zombie lumberjack match and the Miz is in it. You were like, who's the Miz? And you're like, oh, you're in for a terrible time. And then you'd like teleport back to the future. What the? Better keep an eye for this Miz character, you know. Anyway, sorry, I just got carried away there. We were talking about Terry Funk. So in Japan, this whole rivalry between Cactus Jack and Terry Funk seemed to really take on a life of its own. Then whenever Cactus Jack came to ECW, Terry Funk came along and they continued their rivalry, which was a whole lot of fun. You know, that included the part of the show that's at the beginning of every single ECW intro video where it's supposed to be, I think the match was supposed to be Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk, but then the Public Enemy come out and just beat him up. So then they beat up the Public Enemy.
Yeah.
And then I think Cactus, somebody calls for a chair. They say, hey, give me a chair. And the ECW guys in the audience, they would often just give the wrestlers whatever chair they're sitting on. Like that happened a lot. So somebody goes, hey, give me a chair. And the whole audience just starts throwing chairs into the ring. And it's insane to watch. It's amazing. And that was because of Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. So obviously there's a huge influence going on here.
Yeah.
You know? Very influential. And then after that, of course, Terry Funk Mick Foley went to the WWF. Cactus Jack, he went to the WWF he went as Mankind.
Yes, yeah.
And Terry Funk soon followed. But I'm not sure what happened in creative that day. Well, I think I do know what happened in creative that day. From what I've heard, Vince McMahon just did not want to hire Terry Funk. Because of, I think what happened the last time we talked about this, Terry Funk was working for Vince. I think he was supposed to work some Survivor Series show and he didn't want to do it. So he put a note on Vince's office door that said, I'm sorry, I had to go. My horse is already sick. and then he just went home. So I guess that's how he quit.
Hey,
I don't know.
yeah, it works.
It does work. Did you see CM Punk said something like, after the news about Terry Funk being sick broke, Punk was like, in retrospect, I should have just told him my horse was sick. And you're like, boy, he's good. Son of a bitch, man. Punk is the funniest guy. He's correct about everything all the time. How does he do it? So in some creative meeting in the WWF, Vince McMahon was like, I don't like Terry Funk. So somebody was like, well, why don't put a stocking over his head so you can't see his face? Which is what they did. And then they called him Chainsaw Charlie because then that way he's not Terry Funk. So it's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I believe it was Jim Cornette that said, we got to have him come out of a box because everybody, what was it quote? It was some quote like, nobody fails to get over coming out of a box or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and to be fair, right? To be fair, the idea of Terry Funk with a chainsaw, like chainsawing his way out of the box, right?
Mm.
If you say it like that, like it does sound cool, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds interesting. If there's just a box there for no reason, I'm sorry, a box-like structure. Like, you're in the wrestling ring, and then suddenly it's like, oh, watch out for that big human-sized box over here. That's probably fine. Don't look at it. Nothing will happen. It kind of gives the game away, right?
Yeah, you say this, but like I'm pretty sure the box gimmick has been used a hell of a lot in wrestling. Not so much these days anymore, but
But that's it. Like Alexa Bliss didn't even come out of the box. She just sat on top of it.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Put some effort in. Terry Funk at least had a chainsaw. They couldn't give Alexa Bliss a chainsaw.
Oh, that would have been perfect.
Right. WWE, give Alexa Bliss a chainsaw. Imagine they did, like, they were like, okay, we're going to take one piece of creative advice from these guys. Since they're always talking about how great they are, we will listen to one piece of creative advice, and they ignore all of the good bits we had to say. And like, yes, give Alexa Bliss a chainsaw. That's the one.
Well, you never know. They're going back in front of the audiences pretty soon, so
give her a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that fucking rip? That would be amazing. Because none of the other ones have chainsaws.
Exactly.
Bingo, right? And if you want to sweeten the deal, have her chainsaw her way out of a box. Because everybody gets over it coming out of a box.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the rules. So in WWF, Terry Funk was now Chainsaw Charlie, and he had stockings over his head, and he had a chainsaw. You're like, what the fuck? Who thought it was a good idea to A, give Terry Funk a chainsaw, B, reduce his visibility? Like, what the fuck? Am I the only one who thinks that's a terrible idea?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not great.
I'd always watch the chainsaws to see if they're gimmicked. Because I'm like, you can make a chainsaw sound, but just take the blades off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, cool. Because there's nobody would give Terry Funk a chainsaw.
Oh God, no! Jesus! Imagine how dangerous that would be.
Right. I mean, if he put a chicken on his face just to punch a guy, imagine what he would do with it. He would be like a guy in Evil Dead.
Oh, yeah, Ash Williams.
When he puts the chainsaw on his arm.
Yeah.
That'd be Terry Funk. Can you imagine? It'd be unkillable.
Well, there you go. That's how he keeps wrestling for the next 20 odd years then.
He becomes a cyborg.
Yeah.
I mean, that totally makes sense, doesn't it? The story checks out. If anybody's going to be a cyborg, I thought he already was. So he's had a hell of a career, that Terry Funk.
Mm-hmm.
He's done pretty well for himself. Since then, he hasn't really wrestled on a big mainstream corporation or company like long term since the 90s, really.
No, he had that sort of one-off appearance at One Night Stand where I think it was him, Tommy Dreamer, and Beulah McGillicuddy, and they teamed up against Mick Foley, Edge, and Lita.
Ooh, hello.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild match.
You would imagine so. boy, the one night stand things were pretty good.
Yeah, before they ruined ECW, but hey ho.
Ruined it by putting Ezekiel Jackson in there? I don't think so. Ruined ECW, but they had Test.
Yeah, great.
I could go on. Yeah, maybe we'll just leave that one as it is. Yeah. So it's a shame that, well, Terry Funk, I feel like there's a guy, after the 2000s, he can just turn up on like Independence and make a shit ton of money and still draw crowds.
Mm-hmm.
People want to see Terry Funk because you never know what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
He's very unpredictable. He's got that edge to him, but you're not sure what's up or what he's gonna do, which is cool. It's intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
I do like that. Like we said earlier, the way he kind of walks and moves around like a madman, he does that very well. He's very believable.
Well,
Which I like.
I think that's the thing which resonates the most about Terry Funk. Like a lot of wrestlers, you'll hear say that Terry Funk is one of their favorite wrestlers because he brings that sort of believability to everything he does. Like even if you watch his promos as well, like you can watch him and just absolutely believe every word he's saying, no matter how crazy or out there he goes. The way he says it and the way he presents himself, you just don't doubt him whatsoever. And that's the kind of magic that, we don't often see these days. It kind of, I don't know if it's because the curtains come down and we kind of, we know that wrestling's an act and like a lot of these guys are completely different to who we see on TV, but like Terry Funk, you kind of believe that he was always middle-aged and crazy and could have snapped and kicked your ass at any moment.
Yeah, he was always legit. Like you always bought into that. I always thought that was weird these days how we're all convinced it's a work. Like everybody knows it's a work. So people have just stopped. Like they've got worse at acting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like now that everybody knows it's a work, they just don't bother because they're so like clearly scripting and it's really fake. Whereas at least the one thing when you watch some of the older guys, you're like, because they were always kayfabing people, even themselves, I bet.
Yeah.
So they were always like pretty legit. And a guy like Terry Funk, when you hear him talk, you feel that you like he means it. He's legit. I watched a match between Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler
Mm-hmm.
in anticipation for this show, which wasn't quite the match I was hoping for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Terry Funk jumped Lawler before the match and just beat the shit out of him.
Yeah.
So it was 10 minutes of Terry Funk beating the shit out of Jerry Lawler, and then they called it a disqualification. And that was the whole match. And I'm like, how about that? But, Jerry Lawler's a beloved character.
Mm-hmm.
And people loved him. And you look at a guy like Terry Funk, he is the perfect guy to go up against somebody like Jerry Lawler.
Yeah.
Because the way Terry Funk walks around the ring and moves around and has this like deranged realism to him. He's not just like a crazy kooky madman. He's like a guy that'll probably he's a guy that'll fuck himself up just to fuck you up.
Mm-hmm.
And he carries that across every step of the way. So him like jumping Lawler and doing everything he can to beat up Lawler in front of his home audience just proves like how much of a renegade he is and puts like a shit ton of heat on him, which makes Lawler the babyface look great whenever he finally gets his revenge. You could say simple ass fucking booking. Right?
Yeah.
Just the oldest of old school, very simple, but it works. Like even that, just watching that beatdown, you're like, yeah, fuck you, Terry Funk. Which is what you want. I'm well aware that wrestling's a work, but you watch it, you're like, oh, whoa, I want to see Jerry Lawler get his revenge.
Yeah, man. It's I don't know if you've watched this one, but it sounds very similar to the feud he had with Ric Flair in WCW in like the late 80s. I think it was about 89 or something like that, where he was brought in as like they had like 3 judges for this match between Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair, which I think may have been like the third match in like their big trilogy for the title. I think the judges were, just in case it went to like 60 minutes, and the judges would, decide a winner. But after the match and Flair had retained, like Terry Funk basically went over and asked Ric Flair for a title opportunity. And Ric Flair turned him down, basically saying, go back to Hollywood. And so Funk snapped and attacked him, and then pile drove him through a table. And then, this led to like an I Quit match at Clash of the Champions 9, I think it was. And that Clash of the Champions match is glorious. It's just such good storytelling. And, you think Terry Funk, obviously he's amazing. Ric Flair, obviously he's amazing as well. And the way they just gel together and tell this like story where Ric Flair's on the back foot and Terry Funk's doing every evil thing he can to try and force Flair to give up and say, I quit. It's beautiful stuff, man. I highly recommend it.
That was one I had that on the list, and I didn't get around to watching it, so I'm going to try to watch that tomorrow, maybe, hopefully, if I get a chance, because it did look good. Of course, Ric Flair, we all know how good that guy is. Mm-hmm. But again, you look at a guy like Flair and a guy like Funk stood opposite each other in a ring. You know that that's going to be really good, just of how different those two characters are,
Yeah.
Like, Ric Flair is a confident, cocky heel, but Terry Funk, face or heel, he's like a madman. He's a totally wild, crazy. You don't know what he's up to, right? Mm. Which comes like anybody gets that, and it'll even put like the fear into a heel such as Ric Flair. So like you said, like with the Flair on the back foot, like trying to catch up and stuff. That's a good angle, and you can work that with a guy like Terry Funk. It's believable. It makes sense,
I think that even turned Ric Flair face as well for a little bit.
Beating the shit out of Terry Funk.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Because he's such a vicious heel.
Absolutely.
Quite a character. Yeah, dude, that was one I was gonna look up. I was like, what would be better, Ric Flair against Terry Funk or Jerry Lawler against Terry Funk? And roll the dice. You just gotta play the game with the cards you're dealt. Mm-hmm. But it was still it still works. It still gets everything over, and you're like, wow, this guy is badass.
Yeah.
He's legit. He really was one of the last kind of legit guys in pro wrestling.
Oh, without a doubt. And yeah, it's sad to see that he's in this tough position now, and sort of I don't know if he's feeling the effects of his hardcore style or what, but I think it's safe to say we wish him the best and hope he's hanging in there and staying strong.
Exactly. Although to be fair, he's been able to hold off with his hardcore style quite a while. He got away with it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For a long time. I remember seeing Terry Funk, whenever he was wrestling with Cactus Jack in the WWF in 1998, and you're like, well, he's not going to be wrestling too much longer, this Terry Funk, is he?
I mean, it's a running joke in wrestling how many times he's retired. I think his first one was in 1983.
Yeah, I remember his first one being like really like, dude, like, did people really buy that he was going to retire in 83? Like people didn't buy that in 2003. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the way he sold it, man. I don't know if you've seen the clip of the video where he's like in Japan speaking to the fans, and he keeps repeating the words forever, 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 like how much he loves them and stuff. And like it just, again, like we talked about his believability, that he managed to sell the fact that he was retiring, and then obviously it didn't stick, and it hasn't really stuck all the dozens of other times that he's retired either.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask, Do we have an official number on how many times Terry Funk has retired?
I tried Googling it, and Google just didn't know.
Even Google can't figure it out.
No, there's so many.
There you go, man. We broke Google. If you want to figure out a question that Google can't answer, it's how many times has Terry Funk been retired?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guess the number is?
I would say it's probably in double figures. So I'm gonna say about. I'll go with 13.
You see, I don't think it's as high as that. I think that because here's the thing. I think that after 4 times it becomes a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that people have made it into a bigger kind of legend than it really is. So I reckon the real number is probably like 7.
I mean, there is an article on Bleacher Report saying it's an article about Terry Funk and pro wrestling's 5 shortest retirements.
Are they all from Terry Funk?
Oh no! It looks like they're. Yeah, it looks like it's from a bunch of different wrestlers. So I thought that meant it was just Terry Funk's 5 shortest retirements, but never mind.
That would have been great. That would have been a better report.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? That would have been a way better article. But instead, we got this chump. I don't know what his name was. He wrote the article. This bum. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. By the way, if you wrote that article, well, I'm very sorry. You're probably not listening to this. Oh, you should be, because you're a pro wrestling journalist, and this is only pro wrestling podcast in the world. So you better pay attention, Mister.
Yeah.
I feel this is a strange bit. I'm slagging this guy off. I don't even know. Very unusual. The point is, Terry Funk, man, what a legend. What a guy. You know, he's the guy that really deserves that kind of mythical status. I think Terry Funk is one of those real guys. You don't see a guy like that anymore, you know. And I know that sounds really like old man kind of back in my day, but it's true though. Like you're never gonna see a guy like Terry Funk coming along, and that's probably for the better. It's the same way you're not gonna see a guy like Cactus Jack coming along because you're like, shit's not gonna work. No way are we gonna throw you off the building, right? Like imagine all the shit they have to tell Darby Allin not to do. You know what I mean? Like. They're like, Darby, please, we're trying to film a show here. Stop jumping off the fucking ceiling. Stop jumping in front of cars, etc. So he does that a lot. But that's not even like being like Terry Funk, do you know what I mean? Because that's so like here's the thing I don't like about oh boy, we were doing so well. We were doing so well, and then I was like, no, it's annoyed me again. But like whenever Darby Allin does like little stunts like that outside the ring, they're so like self-contained that they're pointless. So you're like him like rolling down the half pipe in a body bag.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, what?
Yeah, what purpose does that have?
But how does that make you look cool? Like, how does that get you over, right?
It's like an unfunny episode of Jackass.
Right. I remember watching an old episode of AEW where the Darby Allin segment was he was outside somewhere. It was all black and white. And then he had a flamethrower. And he used a flamethrower on something. And that was the end of the Darby Allin bit. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And I think that's the problem as well. That they're just like so short that they're meaningless. There's nothing to them.
But there's no point to them. It's just him doing stupid stuff, right? There's no... Because then the question is... if the question is why is he doing this stuff, the answer is because he's an idiot, right? There's absolutely no other explanation for it. And then if that's the answer, then you're like, well, why would I root for this guy? As a theist, you're like, well, he seems like a fucking idiot. And that's the thing. Darby Allin's really good as a wrestler, but I don't like him as a character because I'm like, he just seems like a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Why would I want this idiot to win? Because if he gets his ass kicked and loses, isn't he having a great time anyway? Right? They remember fucking Team Taz kidnapped him and then they let him out or whatever. And the next week, him and Sting were like, "Oh, you lie! I get kidnapped all the time. I like it." What? Like it's impossible to take that guy. He's not like a Terry Funk guy, because it just seems like he's trying way too hard to make it seem like he's crazy, right?
Mm.
Which is like the shittiest. That's the most posery thing you could possibly do.
Oh yeah.
And he is like, which is so funny because he's trying to be the guy that's not a poser at all, and he totally is, right? But if you look at a guy like Terry Funk, you're like, he hasn't changed today. If you look at his match and his demeanor and the way he is at the end of the 90s is the same as it was in the end of the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was still that tough as nails, old, haggard, like fucking
Cowboy.
Desperado.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, he really was this like old, like down in his luck cowboy who would beat the shit out of you, right? He looked like one of those extras in a cowboy film. You know when they go to the Wild West and there's like a shootout in the OK Corral or whatever?
Yeah.
And there's one like old gnarly guy playing cards. This Terry Funk, right? He'd shoot you for a pint. Or he totally fucking would, right?
I'm surprised that he was never given that role.
Why the fuck did nobody ever make Terry Funk into a kick-ass cowboy?
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? Not even in Japan. I would have expected it up in Japan.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the fucking anime TV show with Terry Funk as a kick-ass karate cowboy? But he has a gun.
I paid to watch that.
It's a complex show. There's a lot going on with it, you know? So that's our point, really. It's that Terry Funk, he's a one-of-a-kind character. You're never going to see anybody like Terry Funk coming along. Maybe that's for the best, but at the same time, you know, it's wonderful that he was able to wrestle for so long and go like at a decent level of quality. Like the stuff he was doing in the later half of his career was insane, but he did it and he did it well, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like him and Cactus taking that fucking bump into the dumpsters or whatever.
Yeah.
Rough stuff, man, but you know, he did it because he's a pro and fair play to him, man. You know, we tip our hats to the wonderful Terry Funk. And we hope he's doing okay.
Yeah.
Can we send him a card?
Probably.
Cool. I'm just asking if he could. Now that I know that it's possible, I will consider it. We should, yeah. Everybody, let's all gather together and we'll sign a big card for Terry Funk. And what we'll all do, all of us, is we'll all donate £5 to Terry Funk. And I'll put it in the card and I'll send the card to Terry Funk.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody give me £5 for Terry Funk, of course. For Terry Funk. And I will pass it on to him in the envelope with the card. But just everybody give me £5 and then Terry Funk will have a great retirement. That's what I think.
I think he'd be pretty pissed off if he got a card full of £5 notes. He'd be like, what the hell's this goddamn money? I can't spend this.
Yep. Probably should make him into dollars. You know, you make a good point. I'm going to have to rethink my plan. I tell you what, just give me all the fires now and I'll figure out what to do with them later.
Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair plan, I think. Seems pretty good. So, yep, that's it. Anything else you want to say about good old Terry Funk? The man, the myth, the legend?
If you haven't checked it out, I'd suggest people check out Beyond the Mat, just because that has a big section in it about Terry Funk and one of his many retirement shows. And just go check him out on the network as well, because there's a whole lot of good stuff out there. Yeah,
watch that Cactus Jack and Terry Funk like hardcore match on some episode of Raw. Wasn't it on Raw?
Yes. And maybe don't watch the Terry Funk Jerry Lawler match.
Well, I thought for sure you were gonna say don't watch the Terry Funk chicken match.
Yeah.
Definitely find the one where he fists the chicken.
Yeah.
The Jerry Lawler one, for what it is, like you get it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And he's had other matches with Jerry Lawler that I'm sure were better than the one I watched, but you get the gist. So yes. in that case, I mean, it's Terry Funk beating the shit out of Jerry Lawler. Jerry Lawler is a great sell. Terry Funk looks legit. You know, you can't go wrong. But also that Flair Funk match you were talking about too. You guys gotta check that one out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yes, sir. That's it. I think that's the show. Is it?
I reckon so.
I think so. That's pretty good. So we're saying good luck, Terry Funk. Hopefully you're okay and you'll live forever inside some kind of robot body, like a transformer. That's what we hope. Imagine Terry Funk was the first Transformer.
Oh man, what a
Be
perfect
amazing.
first Transformer.
Right. He's Optimus Prime.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know if Optimus Prime was the first one. Was he the first one?
Well, he was the leader, so
You would think he's Optimus Prime.
yeah.
You think the Prime he'd be the first? I don't fucking know. Anyway, Terry Funk is a robot, and we wish him well. So good luck, Terry Funk. Everybody listening to the show, thank you very much for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already, or don't. We don't mind. It's totally up to you. Make sure to check out some of those match recommendations we give. That's not up to you. That is mandatory. You have to watch those matches. And we're going to be back next week with another episode about something else. We don't know what. You don't know either until you find out next week. So make sure you stay tuned. And it'll be a good time. Oh, dear. Need to work on my outros. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. And we'll see you in the next one. Good day.
Bye-bye.